Yeah, welcome everyone, and onwards and upwards. It can only go up from here, right? Okay, well, welcome to MarshWatch Great Lakes Edition, everyone. Um, First off, I'd like to recognize the indigenous peoples who were the original inhabitants of the land in the many different places where we are gathered today. We won't attempt to identify all the many dozens, maybe even hundreds perhaps, of the different communities, but we encourage you to learn more about the peoples who originally occupied the lands where each of you is currently located. And we very much hope that through birds and a shared love of nature, that we can all come together in a spirit of respect and reconciliation. We'd also like to formally introduce ourselves, of course. Presenting with me tonight is my longtime friend and colleague, Kathy Jones. Kathy is volunteer manager and biologist here at Birds Canada, and she's worked with marsh birds and other wetland wildlife for decades. She delivers the Marsh Monitoring Program, and we'll describe a little bit more about what that is in a moment, and the Canadian Lakes Loon Survey, among other long-term monitoring programs here at Birds Canada. She's also a globally renowned expert on the art and science of how to deliver volunteer programs. I'm Doug Tozer. I'm Director of Waterbirds and Wetlands here at Birds Canada, and I've also been involved in waterbird and wetland science for many years. In addition to co-delivering the Marsh Monitoring Program and the Canadian Lakes Loon Survey with Kathy. I also lead, and this one's a bit of a long one, but the Long Point Waterfowl and Wetlands Research Program here at Birds Canada. So both Kathy and I, we really love wetlands and the wildlife they support. So we're very much looking forward to our time with you during this very first Great Lakes edition of Marsh Watch this year. Okay. To officially start things off, let's paint the big picture. So, Birds Canada currently offers MarshWatch in four different regions, which we refer to as editions. MarshWatch started in the prairies in 2023, and it was tremendously successful right from the start. So, recognizing that we were onto a good thing, we've expanded the initiative to the Great Lakes, the Maritimes, and Newfoundland. And each edition in each region has a similar approach, like it's more or less delivered the same way, but there's some minor differences in delivery and the details of the content. I'd like to highlight that we're extremely grateful for funding support from the Hodgson Family Foundation and the TD Friends of the Environment Foundation for helping expand the program to the Great Lakes. So, MarshWatch is meant for beginners and other keen naturalists. Of course, you require no prior experience identifying birds or prior experience surveying birds. And by the end of the program, we hope that you'll be able to identify the common bird and frog species found in your area. And if you choose to do so, you'll be able to submit a checklist of your bird and frog observations to one of our online databases using our Nature Counts open data platform. So sort of a 1-2 punch, so to speak. One, learn the common birds and frogs, and two, learn how to report your observations of them. The idea is that by participating in MarshWatch, you'll be ready to take part in some of our more demanding monitoring programs if you wish to do so, particularly the Marsh Monitoring Program. So please keep this in mind. After MarshWatch, we'd love to have you continue on and take part in some of our other programs if you're up for it. So MarshWatch uses two key approaches to get you learning new skills. First is the webinars. You're currently in the first webinar, obviously. There's four other webinars for a total of 5 every other week between now and late May. The second approach is getting out to visit wetlands of your choice and submitting checklists of your bird and frog observations. Ideally, you do these visits at least once between each webinar so you can apply your learning as you go through the season, although there's no pressure whatsoever to do this second component involving wetland visits and checklists. It's entirely up to you. We do it this way by design, as we realize some of you may not have access to a wetland, or your schedule might not allow it, or whatever else. Plus, we only want you to try submitting a checklist if you really feel genuinely comfortable doing so. So entirely your call, and we're happy with whatever you decide. Do the visits to the wetlands, submit the checklist, or don't do either of those. All good. The content of the 5 webinars focuses on bird and frog identification by sight, and in many cases, we'll talk about sound as well. We don't directly cover much of anything else during these webinars. We do that on purpose to maximize the time we have to learn the many different species. To learn how to submit checklists of your bird and frog observations, we'll supply you with a link to a short online video that'll instruct you how to do this. We also don't directly cover in the webinars various basics about birding that many of you may be wondering about, such as, how to use binoculars, where to find good bird guides, that sort of thing. But not to worry, we'll supply you with a link to another video instructing you on all of that too, if you're keen for that content as well. This way, each of you gets to pick and choose. It's kind of like pick your own adventure. You get to pick and choose what content you want, kind of like a buffet style dinner, get a bit of whatever you like. And the links for these videos are under the resources tab on the Great Lakes MarshWatch webpage. The link's at the top of the screen there, and we'll probably also put them in the chat too. So you should be able to find them easily when and if you want them. In addition to bird and frog identification, we'll also spend a bit of time learning about the major threats and issues that wetlands face in the Great Lakes region. It's one thing to be able to identify the critters you're observing in the region's marshes, but it's really important, I think, to know about the bigger picture as well. And heads up that it won't be all doom and gloom, despite the many threats and issues in our wetlands. There's a bunch of really good wetland restoration work being done by conservation organizations in the region that's ensuring we'll have some very nice high quality wetlands around for birds and frogs for some time to come. So we're pumped to tell you about some of that work too. It's nice to have some good news stories in the mix as well. So there you have it. That's a high-level overview of where we're headed with MarshWatch over the 5 webinars, the Great Lakes edition, of course. And just to make sure we've been clear, here's a reminder of the differences between MarshWatch and the Marsh Monitoring Program, because we've been talking about both, and it can be confusing keeping the two straight if you're not familiar. So let's just overview things. As we've just seen, the main purpose of MarshWatch is training and getting you up to speed on your bird and frog ID and on your use of the data entry tools and nature counts for entering those checklists. As part of its design, MarshWatch has none of the pressure of our many different formal surveys in that the MarshWatch schedule is entirely up to you. You can visit whatever wetlands you like, no matter where they are or what type they are. And ultimately, MarshWatch data are not used, even though they're stored in our nature count system. MarshWatch data simply exist for practice. And the idea is that if you're comfortable and confident enough that you'd like your data to be used for conservation purposes, then we hope that you'll want to participate in one of our more formal monitoring programs, such as the Marsh Monitoring Program or eBird Canada or something like that. So that's MarshWatch. By contrast, the Marsh Monitoring Program, or MMP for short, Kathy and I will default to that without even realizing it. The MMP, it's not a training program. It assumes you already know how to ID birds and frogs in your area, and it has specific dates, times, and types of wetlands to be surveyed amongst various other rules and guidelines that make the data standardized. So we can use it for things like calculating population trends over time for different species, or estimating population sizes for conservation planning, or species at risk assessments and status reports, and a whole list of other tools we use to try and conserve and protect birds and frogs. Okay, so we'll learn to identify about 60 species of birds and 8 species of frogs. It sounds like a lot, and it is. But not to worry, we're going to build things up from a good foundation, we hope. And we've chosen the species carefully. Most of them are common species that you are very likely to encounter in any wetland in central Ontario, southwestern Quebec, the lower Great Lakes, meaning the watersheds of Lakes Huron, Erie, and Ontario, as well as the watershed of the Ottawa and St. Lawrence River, as shown here on this map. So that's the common stuff. The rest of the species are wetland-associated species that are rare and are of conservation concern, with many of them listed under various legislation as species at risk. So good to learn how to recognize these less common wetland-associated species too, because conservation organizations like Birds Canada, of course, are especially interested in them for a variety of reasons. So a mix of common and rare stuff. Okay, here. Now we're finally getting into the meat and potatoes here. So we'll tackle the 60 species of birds by arranging them into 8 groups that you see here. Each group has characteristics that allow them to be quickly and fairly easily recognized in the field compared to the other groups. So our approach will be to first place an unknown bird into one of these 8 groups before we try to figure out what species it is. It's just a more convenient, straightforward way to break down the 60 species because the birds has a lot. The frogs, we don't need to do groupings because there's only 8, but with the 60, it makes sense to have this hat rack with these 8 groups. And this really helps narrow things down tremendously by using this grouping system. So the groups are duck-like birds, heron-like birds, gulls and terns, rails, shorebirds, raptors, swallows, and songbirds. So here's a little more detail about each of the groups. Let's start with duck-like birds. Um, Duck-like birds include ducks, of course, as well as geese, swans, grebes, and cormorants. They're almost always swimming on the water or in flight, although there's some exceptions, such as when geese and some ducks feed by walking around on the ground in fields or lawns or along exposed shorelines. But for the most part, they're swimming or flying somewhere so they can land in the water and swim. This is the only group that have some members that regularly disappear under the water by diving, like we see at the bottom here with a sequence where a bufflehead, which is a type of duck, dives under the surface. And I think you can see my cursor. Here it is. It's just about to go in the water and then it disappears and down it goes. So the only group that has members that dive like this. It's also the only group that has members that tip up on the water, which is where they stick their heads and necks down out of sight under the surface to get food down on the bottom, and you only see their feet and tails sticking straight up in the air, as with this mallard up here in the top right corner. It looks hilarious. I actually saw a mute swan doing this today. Big, huge swan. It's got his butt up in the air and its feet sticking up. It looks hilarious. But they do this all the time. And if you see tipping up, you got a duck-like bird for sure. If it dives in the water, it's duck-like bird. A little bit of a note here. We won't learn female ducks because they're extremely difficult to identify due to their very similar appearances among species, like you see here with this wide selection. Focusing on the more distinct males will make things more straightforward, in part so you don't get frustrated. Now, please don't get us wrong. Female ducks are impressive and amazing in their own right. It's just that they can be quite complicated to identify in the field and can be overwhelming when you're beginning. So we're going to leave them behind, and we can get away to some extent with focusing on male ducks in the Great Lakes region because in this part of the world, one mostly sees ducks as mated pairs rather than females on their own. So you can cheat and go to the more distinctive male to get your ID, while also admiring the female, the pair as well, of course. So no female ducks. Okay, that'll just make things simpler. Okay, our next group, heron-like birds, includes herons, of course, as well as night herons, egrets, cranes, and bitterns. They're typically seen standing around near the water's edge or walking along in the water or on the mud as they scan for prey that they can grab with their big bills, or they're seen flying around in flight. They have long necks, long legs, and long dagger-like bills. Everything is long with this group. Some of them are fairly conspicuous and spend lots of time out in the open, whereas others hide really, really well and are almost never seen and are more likely to be heard. So for these really secretive ones, we'll concentrate on their calls as well as what they look like because you often hear them instead of seeing. Gulls and terns. So just about all of you, I bet, will probably be familiar with gulls in general. You see them at the McDonald's or your local fast food restaurant. Um, maybe you might not be so much familiar with terns, but terns are basically smaller, slimmer, more elegant versions of gulls. Gulls and terns can be found sitting on the water, standing on the shore, or very often flying around over the water foraging, but they're almost always associated with open water in one way or another. They're often in flocks, but sometimes with dozens or hundreds of individuals sitting in one place, although or flying around feeding in one place too, although they're frequently found alone as well. So you get the whole gradient. They're fairly large as far as things go, about the size of a chicken or a crow. So they're not, a little itty bitty songbird or anything like that. And the key to identifying the adults is that they're mostly white or white with only a bit of brown streaking, especially on their heads, with various shades of solid light gray, mostly on their backs, and usually with black wingtips. So we got white, we got a light gray back, and we got black wingtips. Um, the bills and the legs are colored and will be important for identifying individuals to species, as we will see later. We will focus on adult gulls and terns to keep things easier. Like female ducks, the younger plumages of gulls and terns are quite complicated and difficult to identify because they're almost all dull, mottled, streaky browns or grays, as you can see in the example shown here. So we'll steer clear of these young gull and tern plumages to keep things simpler and try to ensure that you don't get frustrated. We'll stick to the adults. Okay, rails, one of my favorite groups. Rails include rails, of course, as well as coots and gallinules, which are also types of rails. This group is a bit tricky because they can be just about anywhere around water. They can be completely hidden within thick vegetation, they can be at the edge, they can be out swimming in the open, and anything in between. And the rails superficially look like herons, and coots and gallinules resemble duck-like birds when they're swimming. So they're kind of tricky, but there's something that saves us. All 5 species of this group are shown here that we're going to cover. You're seeing them all. There's 3 species of rails across the top up here, and 1 species of coot and 1 species of gallinule on the bottom. They're shown here. This is a group of coots together here on the bottom left. All the 3 rails look like chickens across the top with black and white barred flanks. So here on this one, you can see the black and white barred flanks here, and it's peaking here, and it's also here. So that makes that pretty easy. And then both the coot and the gallinule have solid chalkboard gray bodies. You can see solid chalkboard gray here, solid chalkboard gray here. But the coot has a really obvious white bill, as you can see here, and the gallinule has a very obvious yellow and red bill. So even though these guys can be found just about anywhere, and they sort of a lot of the members resemble multiple other groups, you are kind of saved because they kind of look like chickens and they have black and barred flanks, or they're chalkboard gray and they've got these bright colored bills, and then you know it's one of the 5 rails that we're going to deal with. Shorebirds. There's 3 species, all are shown here. We're only going to do 3 species in this group. The killdeer, which is a plover, as well as a snipe, the Wilson snipe, and a sandpiper called the spotted sandpiper. Members of this group are nearly always found walking or running around on the shore, where they use their typically long, specialized bills to pick or probe muddy or sandy areas for food. Or you'll see them in flight, of course. Sometimes they perch on posts or other elevated places. They do not swim. I think they're capable of it, but you hardly ever see them swimming. They're fairly small, about the size of a robin. Basically think long-legged, long-billed, robin-sized bird running across mud or algae or sand, and it will probably be one of these species, or at least in this group. Raptors are fairly distinctive. They're bigger than a crow, with big, broad wings that make their heads and bodies look relatively small. So like you can see here on this osprey, you got these big, broad wings, but it's got this dinky little head and this little tail relative to the wings. And being predators, they have big, strong, hooked bills. I mean, you can see the massive hook on this bald eagle bill here, for example. You'll often see them flying over or flying past you or sitting in a tree, or less frequently sitting on the ground, sometimes even. In flight, they're big, like some of our heron-like birds, for example, but of course, they lack that group's long neck and long legs. We'll be covering 3 species, I think I mentioned, bald eagle, osprey, and northern harrier, each of them distinctive in their own ways that we'll cover later. The swallows. This group is almost always flying around really, really fast, like annoyingly fast, as they catch insects on the wing. Sometimes you'll see them sitting on a fence or a power line, or sometimes in a shrub, but for the most part, you'll see them in flight, either low over the water or higher overhead. Sometimes they're up so high you can barely even see them, like they're a little speck way, way up. They're small, about the size of a budgie, with torpedo-shaped bodies and long, pointy wings. You often get very quick, unsatisfactory looks, like annoyingly so, like some of the pictures here suggest. But we'll work on tips and tricks to tell six species apart, including vocalizations for some, which can often help because they often do call as they go, zipping by you, and you're like, which swallow was that? And our last group, but certainly not the least, the songbirds is a diverse group that includes blackbirds, flycatchers, sparrows, warblers, and wrens. They're small compared to most of the rest of the bird groups we'll be learning, about the size of a robin or smaller down to sparrow-sized. They mostly perch on things like cattails or shrubs or some elevated place, although they will also hop or run around on the ground too, such as on mud or along a shoreline. They do not swim, and for the most part, they avoid coming in contact with water altogether, although sometimes they'll hop or walk through really, really shallow, a film of water kind of thing, like a puddle. Almost all of them sing musical songs, hence the name of the group, and we'll be dealing with a lot of the songs for this group too, in addition to learning what they look like. Okay, so that was a fair bit to take in. So let's go back over things again and review the key points that we just learned for each of these eight groups. So first, the duck-like birds. Duck-like birds include ducks, geese, swans, grebes, and cormorants. They're almost always swimming on the water or flying over. They're the only group that has members that regularly disappear under the water by diving under the surface, and they're the only group that has members that tip up to get food under the surface. Basically, anything swimming around or flying over that looks more or less like a duck is almost likely to be in this group. Heron-like birds include herons, night herons, egrets, cranes, and bitterns. They're typically seen standing near the water's edge, walking slowly in the water or on the mud, or flying as they don't swim. They have long legs, long necks, and long dagger-like beaks. Everything's long with these guys, remember, and these long features are evident whether they're standing, walking, or flying. You've always got that three-way combination of long beak, long neck, long legs. Gulls and terns are distinctive because the adults are almost always white with various shades of solid light gray, mostly on their backs, and usually with black wingtips. They're about the size of a crow or a bit smaller. Basically, anything that looks more or less like your quintessential seagull is probably in this group. The rails we'll be dealing with are distinctive because they either look like chickens with the black and white barred flanks, like you can see on this king rail on the left, or they have solid chalkboard gray bodies with uniquely colored bills, as we see with this gallinule on the right. The three species of shorebirds we'll be covering are long-legged, long-billed, robin-sized birds that run or walk across mud or algae. Sometimes they run really fast. It's pretty hilarious. They don't hop, but they run. The double-banded killdeer is distinctive, as we see down here. Nothing we will cover has this double dark brown breastband, but we'll deal with that in more detail later when we get into the species. The three species of raptors we'll be learning are bigger than a crow with big, broad wings that make their heads and bodies look relatively small. They also have big, strong, hooked bills and are often seen flying over or sitting in a tree. The swallows are almost always flying around really, really fast. They're small, about the size of a budgie, with torpedo-shaped bodies and long, pointy wings. So the torpedo shape it kind of you could almost flip this around, and this could be its head, and this could be its bill, kind of thing. It's the same shape, sort of at both ends, kind of thing. And the songbirds. Songbirds are small, about the size of a robin or smaller. They're almost always found perching on things. Almost all of them sing musical songs. Okay, so now you've been introduced to the 8 main groups of birds that we'll be using as our framework with which to tackle the 60 bird species that we're going to learn. Next, we'd like to get familiar with a few members of each of these groups. So we've picked species that you should be seeing right now at the very beginning of the season. So if you take us up on visiting a wetland in the next couple of weeks before webinar 2, you will hopefully get to see some of these species. So first off, a super easy species that many of you will already be familiar with, Canada goose. It's one of our duck-like birds because it looks like a duck and it swims around on the water most of the time. Sometimes it tips up to get water plants from below the surface, which is one of our defining features, of course, for duck-like birds. It's distinctive with a black neck, a telltale white cheek patch, brown body, and it has a white rear towards the rear end here that often you can see. No other large duck-like bird that we'll be learning has this pattern on its neck and head. They also have a very loud honking call that is quite distinctive. Hold on, let's see if we can get our first bit of sound to work here.
Just would like to double check and make sure people could hear that because I did not.
That's all right. I'll imitate them. How's that? Sorry about that, folks. So, Canada goose, they have like a aha, ah, ah honk like that. This is gonna be maybe the imitations will be more entertaining. Maybe you'll get more out of them. I don't know. Okay, so anyway, that's you often hear them honking before you see them, but the honking's really distinctive as well. Okay, how about mallard? So another species that many of you will likely already be familiar with. Um, it's one of our duck-like birds, of course, because it looks like a duck. It's your quintessential duck, and it swims around on the water most of the time. It sometimes tips up to get water plants below the surface. You can see one doing it up here on the right. The males are distinctive, super distinctive, with the emerald green head. They have bright yellow bills and a white neck collar above a dark brown breast. So you get this white line here and then this brown section down here. And they have curly tail feathers. These awesome curly tail feathers. It even shows up on this one in flight, which is kind of fun. In flight, or when they stretch their wings, they show a rectangular blue patch bordered by white, which will be useful for telling it from another species later. So you can see here on this flying bird, you got this bluish rectangle with these white borders on either side. It's called the speculum, the colored part of a duck's wing, and it's often used as a key feature for telling different ducks apart. Okay, I think we covered everything there. Oh yeah, and of course their call, which you won't get to hear, it's just your quintessential quack. Quack, quack, quack. That can be a clue.
Doug, if you want to try that again, you can. I just made you the only host, and that may give you the option there.
Sure. Okay, hold on. Let's see here. Are you hearing anything? I am, but you probably aren't. Nothing?
Nothing.
Okay, all right. All right. Well, we'll figure it out for next time. Sorry, folks. Okay. This one, the great blue heron, is one of our heron-like birds as it has a long dagger-like bill, long legs, and long neck. You got that three-way long combination, all of which are visible while it's standing, walking, or in flight. This species is really big, like as tall as a small child kind of thing. And it's often seen out in the open, either at the water's edge or wading farther out in shallow water. The adults have black and white stripes on the face and head. So here's an adult here. You got this, bold black and white contrasting face pattern. Here's another adult, white, black, white, adult here, contrasty. Whereas the young birds have grayish heads without the contrasting stripes. So here's a young one. It's not quite as contrasty. It's sort of got a gray instead of a black top and this isn't nearly as bright white. Same with this juvenile down here. It's just not quite as contrasting. Um, During the breeding period, they have long plume feathers on the head and body. So you can see these big plume feathers coming out the back of the neck. Here on this one, there's a little bit of one probably showing here on this one in flight. So they only have that in the spring. And it has an amusing grunt-like call that you often hear if you disturb them and they flush and fly away from you. And it's like a bark almost, like and if you get onto that, because I often flush without you seeing them, but they give that call almost like they're annoyed that you ruined their afternoon and made them move, kind of thing. And so it's good to get onto that call because you sometimes will hear that after they've flushed, but you didn't see it quite yet. So to give you a clue that they're there. Okay, Sandhill Crane is one of our heron-like birds because, of course, it has a long dagger-like bill, it's got a long neck, and it's got long, long legs, all of which are visible while it's standing, walking, or in flight. Like the great blue heron, this species is really big as well, as tall as a small child, and it's often seen out in the open. So the adults, the way you tell it from a great blue heron, because they look superficially very similar, um, is the adults have a red forehead with a white cheek on the head. So you got this red section and you got this white cheek in here. You can see the shows up really well here on this bird, white cheek, red part. And the body is grayish with some rusty reddish colors mixed in. So you don't get the bluish body of a great blue heron. You got gray on the sandhill crane. The young birds lack the red forehead and the white cheek. There's a young bird here, and you can see it's just got a plain gray face. It doesn't have the white cheek or the red part. And it has a loud, distinctive bugling call that's audible over long distances. I won't even try to to imitate it, but it's quite distinctive and quite loud. Like you can hear it for kilometers away. Um, the killdeer is one of our three shorebird species. It's about the size of a robin, as you can see in the bottom left here. Here's one right beside a robin. Here's the killdeer. Here's a robin behind it. They're almost identical sizing. Um, and it sort of acts like a robin, in that it's often seen running around on shore or on mud flats, running kind of like you'd expect a robin running around on the lawn, while killdeers run around on mud or shore, same kind of manner. It's solid brown above, white below, and it has very distinctive dark double breast band. So nothing else has two big black breast bands like that we're going to look at. An easy one to learn. It also says its name and calls a lot. So it has this high-pitched call, and it goes, killdeer, 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 over and over like that, really loud. Bald eagle is one of our raptors because it's bigger than a crow with broad wings that make its head and body look relatively small. These birds are huge. They've been described as a flying plank. Um, they literally look like a 6 foot long 2x8s soaring around. The adults are unmistakable with their dark bodies, white heads, white tails, and bright yellow hooked bills. There's an adult sitting on the left here, and there's an adult flying here. Um, they take several years to reach adulthood, though. So the young birds are various mixtures of white and brown without the pure white head and the pure white tail of the adults, as you see in the two birds on the right. So here's a young bird. It's got a dark head, dark tail, and all this mottling in here. And here's a juvenile sitting. And there's the juveniles, like, as this is probably these are probably first year birds, I imagine. They look a little bit different in year 2 and year 3, and they have more white as they go along. But they don't look like this bird till they're at least 4 or often 5. 4-year-old birds often still have some dark showing in the tail. Okay, and our second last species for tonight, the red-winged blackbird, is very common in wetlands throughout the Great Lakes. You should all get to see lots of these. It's about the size of a robin or a bit smaller, and often perches on vegetation or sits up on some other elevated place, unless it's flying, of course. So all that puts the species in our songbird group. Note that males look entirely different compared to females in this species. Males are jet black with a very obvious red and yellow shoulder patch. Although note that sometimes they hide this patch, so it's barely visible. Sometimes just a thin yellow line showing and no red visible at all. They can pull the black feathers down over top of that, so it's not always there. Females, by contrast, are smaller and brownish with lots of streaking on them. They look like a totally different species. So don't get tricked by that. Females show a light colored eyebrow line above and behind the eye. So if you can see my cursor, there's this line here and this line showing in here. That can be a good clue. They also often show a pale orange wash around the face. That's more obvious on this bird up top in the middle here. You can see there's this orange wash in here. It doesn't show up so well on this bird down here. Both have black triangular shaped bills. I mean, this really is like literally, it's as if you drew a triangle, really triangular bill. The males have a distinctive song, which sounds like conqueree, conqueree kind of thing, and they often give an alarm note that sounds like C. It's like this high-pitched C, C. Um, Plus, they have many other vocalizations that sound like various chucks and rattles. Um, they'll do like that, and then they have the C note and the conqueree, and there's a bunch of other things too. There's actually a whole um, set of different vocalizations that they have, but the conqueree song and the C note, which is sort of like a mild alarm note when they're kind of concerned about something, and the chuck, those three are the ones that you hear the most. Okay, and the last species of bird for tonight, like the red-winged blackbird, the common grackle is also very common, so you should see lots of these too. They're about the size of a robin or a bit bigger and often perch unless they're flying. Sometimes they walk around on the ground. They also have lots of musical vocalization. So all that puts them in our songbird group, of course. Males and females look nearly the same, although the males are brighter and shinier and have longer tails. They appear dark brown or black, but if you get them in the right light, like when the sun shines on them, for example, at just the right angle, they can show an iridescent bluish head and bronze body. You can get a sense for that on these birds. They got blue head, sort of a bronzy body, blue head, bronzy body. They have a strong, heavy-looking bill that curves ever so slightly downwards. You can get a feel for that. It's like just a bit of a downward curve there. Same with here. It's kind of curving a little bit up and down. The song is short and squeaky and sounds to some like read a leak, read a leak. Whereas the call is a simple chuck that actually sounds very similar to the red-winged blackbird's chuck to the point where you most of the time you'll just guess sort of which one's which. But at least if you hear a chuck, it tips you off that it's one of the blackbirds, either grackle or red-winged blackbird. All right. To wrap things up, we'll end with four frog species that are the very, very first ones to start calling early in the spring. You almost never see these frogs early in the year. You only tend to hear them. So we'll concentrate on how they sound. We're not going to have the sound files to play, but we'll get around this here with some imitations.
So,
Yep.
Doug, I have one more thing for you to try. Do you have the three dots more at the bottom?
Um,
Little circle
yep,
with,
got it.
if you click on that, there might be a share sound option.
Share computer sound. That sounds like we might want to do it.
It's a bit late, I
Um,
know, and I'm sorry, guys. We'll get better at this. It's been a while. It's been a year since we've done one.
all right. Are you hearing something now?
Yes.
Aha. Okay. All right. Okay. Well, we have sound. Yay. Um, okay, where were we? So we'll concentrate on sound and we will be able to show you that we can maybe go back quickly if we have time, which we might to do the sounds we missed. So um the easiest of the four frogs we have here probably is spring peeper on the bottom left, which has a high-pitched peep repeated in a seemingly never-ending series. So here we go. Hopefully you're hearing that. So it's just peep, 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 peep. Um, at the top left is the wood frog, which sounds like ducks quacking in the distance. And I think we already played this one, but we'll play it again because it's fun. So it's really guttural, low, repeated quickly. Then there's northern leopard frog at the top right, which sounds like a loud snore followed by chuckling, which some think sounds like wet hands being rubbed on a balloon. So you'll see what I mean when you hear it here. Now there's spring peepers in the background, but the snore in the foreground is what you want. And then that's the chuckle. So let's hear that again. Isn't that hilarious? The best things ever. Hold on, my cursor's just being annoying here. Here we go. It almost sounds like somebody burping and then a snore. It's the best call ever. It's really great when you get a whole chorus of northern leopard frogs doing that all at the same time. And we've got chorus frog, which can be either boreal chorus frog or western chorus frog, depending on what part of the Great Lakes region you're in. But in southern Ontario, it'll be western chorus frog, probably for the most part. But they both sound nearly identical. This one is a trill that sounds like a finger being drawn across the teeth of a comb. Okay, here we go. Hold on, I got something on top of it. Just have to move it. There we go. So you can kind of imagine you're taking your fingernail and going across the teeth of a comb. Let's hear that one again. My cursor will let me do it. So that's chorus frog. And we did all four. So for the most part, you'll hear all four of these more at night, but chorus frogs also call quite a bit during the day as well. In fact, sometimes they call more during the day than they do at night, depending on what's going on. So um, let's just go back and pick up our sounds. So, Canada Goose, everybody's heard Canada Goose, big loud honk, right? And so that was like one goose, but when you get a bunch of them together, it can be a lot. And then your quintessential quack for the mallard. You literally say quack, quack, quack. Oh yeah, this is the grunt of a great blue heron that they do this when you flush them and they fly away from you. Just sort of like that. Do it again here. You can almost feel the annoyance, like, you made me move, you ruined my morning, kind of thing. And the bugle of Sandhill Crane, it's just really loud, clear bugle. There's a red-winged blackbird singing in the background with this one. Okay. And see if we can get this to move along here. Killdeer says its name. Killdeer, killdeer, killdeer. That one's nice. Says his name. And so Red-winged Blackbird, the song, the conqueree, and I think this might also have the C notes in the same recording. So there was two conqueree songs and then two C notes after it. Hear it again here. Conqueree. It really does sound like it's saying C. And then you can hear a couple chucks there at the end. So this other recording is various other chucks and rattles. Okay. And grackles. So the Reed-a-Leak song sounds like this. Leak, leak. And then I think this recording that I have of the chuck, unfortunately, sorry, I think it's really quiet, so you might not even be able to hear this very well, but let's try it. It's literally just, chuck, 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 chuck. Okay, frogs. Okay, so let's find out. So that was a fair bit to take in. We covered 8 bird species and 4 frog species. Here's a quick review of the bird species. We had 2 duck-like birds, Canada goose and mallard, easily recognizable in this group because they look like ducks and are mostly found swimming on the water. Canada goose, super distinctive with the black neck and white cheek patch. Mallard is super distinctive with emerald green head and the bright yellow bill. Then we looked at 2 heron-like species, great blue heron and sandhill crane. They're up here on the top right, recognizable in this group because of their long dagger-like bills, long necks, long legs. Remember, everything's long with them. Great blue heron has the black and white head stripes and bluish body, whereas sandhill crane has the red forehead and white cheek patch and a grayish body. We looked at one shorebird, the killdeer. It's down here on the left in the second row, easily identified by its double brown breastband. We saw one raptor, the unmistakable bald eagle with its white head and white tail. And we looked at 2 songbirds, red-winged blackbird and common grackle. The red-winged male is easy with its red and white shoulder patch and jet black body. And the very different looking female comes with dense brown streaking. You can see the streaks here on the front. Light colored eyebrow, which on this bird here, that's the light colored eyebrow right above the eye right there. And usually a pale orangish wash around the face, although it's not very distinctive on that bird. And then, of course, the triangular bill. Common grackle has a strong, heavy-looking bill, slightly decurved, long tail, bluish head, and bronzy body. Plus, the vocalizations of these 2 songbirds can help us as well. Conqueree and the C note and chucks being heard most for the red-winged blackbird, and Reed-a-Leak for the song on the grackle, and a chuck as well as a call on the grackle. And then just we'll quickly do a review of the frogs that we did. We did 4 frog species. The spring peeper has a high-pitched peep repeated in a seemingly never-ending series. The wood frog sounds like ducks quacking in the distance. The northern leopard frog sounds like a loud snore followed by chuckling. Ignore the peepers in the background. And the chorus frog sounds like a finger being drawn across the teeth of a comb. And that brings us to the end of the formal part of webinar 1. So we'll stop the recording here.